Ethan never imagined a single message could change how he looked at someone he had known for years. It came on a quiet afternoon, when the sky over London hung low and grey, pressing against his apartment windows like a secret waiting to be told. His phone buzzed with a name that made him pause, Daniel Miller. Ryan's father. The message was simple: "Hey Ethan, I could use a hand fixing something around the house if you're free this weekend." Ethan read it twice, unsure why Daniel would ask him instead of Ryan. Still, politeness outweighed hesitation. He typed back, "Sure, happy to help." Then, he sat staring at the screen, wondering if he'd done the right thing. Daniel had always been a distant but polite figure in his life, warm during greetings, generous with advice, but never more than that. Ethan had spent countless weekends at Ryan's place during university breaks, and Daniel had always carried himself with quiet dignity, like a man used to holding everything together. He'd laugh occasionally, but there was always a restraint behind it, an invisible wall that no one tried to climb. Saturday came cloaked in drizzle. Ethan parked outside the Miller's house, a modest brick home framed by aging oak trees. The garden looked well kept, though the air felt oddly still. Ryan wasn't home. He'd mentioned earlier that he was out of town visiting his mother. Ethan hesitated at the door, listening to the faint hum of rain before pressing the bell. Daniel opened the door wearing a soft gray jumper, sleeves pushed to his elbows. His smile was genuine but weary. "Ethan, thank you for coming. Come in, you must be freezing." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and something freshly brewed. It was quiet, too quiet, Ethan thought. No music, no laughter, just the ticking of a clock and the occasional sigh of the wind against the windows. The cabinet door in the kitchen came off its hinge, Daniel explained, leading him through the hall. "I figured you'd be handier than I am." Ethan laughed lightly, partly to ease his own nerves. "I can give it a try. Not sure if I'm an expert, though." They worked together in companionable silence. Daniel handed him tools, steady and careful, while Ethan focused on aligning the crooked hinge. Yet, beneath the ordinary task, a strange awareness began to form, subtle, but persistent. It wasn't attraction exactly, more like a recognition of loneliness in someone else that mirrored his own. "You've done well for yourself, Ethan," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Ryan tells me you've been working long hours." Ethan shrugged. "Trying to. Feels like I'm just chasing stability. Maybe that's what growing up is, wanting less chaos." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Less chaos. That's all I want these days." Ethan glanced up. There was something different in Daniel's eyes, a tired kindness, a longing for something unspoken. He wanted to ask if Daniel was all right, but that would have felt too personal. Instead, he tightened the last screw and stepped back. "That should do it," he said. Daniel leaned closer to inspect the hinge, his shoulder brushing lightly against Ethan's. The contact was accidental, yet it carried a surprising weight. Daniel didn't move away immediately, and neither did Ethan. A few seconds passed before Daniel exhaled quietly and stepped back. "Thank you," Daniel said, voice low. "You've saved me from another week of frustration. Happy to help." Ethan smiled, though he felt strangely unsettled. Daniel poured 2 cups of tea and motioned toward the small table by the kitchen window. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the view of the garden. They talked, about work, about Ryan's plans, about small things that somehow felt large in the silence of that room. Daniel's laugh was softer than Ethan remembered. There was warmth in it, but also a trace of sorrow. When he spoke about Ryan, pride and sadness intertwined in his tone. Ethan found himself listening more intently than he meant to, drawn not by the words, but by the pauses between them, the spaces where honesty seemed to live. When Ethan finally stood to leave, Daniel walked him to the door. "You're always welcome here," he said quietly, hands in his pockets. "It's good to have company." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. The words lingered even after he stepped into the rain. Driving home, he caught his reflection in the side mirror, a face both thoughtful and uncertain. Something had shifted, though he couldn't name what. The message had seemed so simple, but as the rain thickened against his windshield, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the call had opened a door neither of them had meant to find. Ethan told himself it had been nothing, just a favor for a friend's father. Yet, Daniel lingered in his thoughts more than he wanted to admit. A week passed, then another, and each day seemed to circle back to that quiet afternoon, the rain, the tea, the subtle gravity between them. When the second message arrived, it felt both unexpected and inevitable. "Thanks again for your help last time. I've been trying to fix the garden lights. Could use your opinion if you're free." Ethan hesitated, thumb hovering over his phone. He typed, "Sure, I can stop by," then deleted it. He told himself to ignore the text, to forget the faint pull that came with Daniel's voice in memory. But an hour later, he replied. "I'll come after work." The evening light was golden when he reached the familiar street. Daniel greeted him at the door with the same quiet ease, though something in his eyes looked different, calmer, maybe, or simply resigned. "Good to see you again," he said. The garden glowed with soft amber bulbs scattered along the fence. Daniel crouched near a tangled wire, muttering to himself about faulty circuits. Ethan joined him, and together they adjusted cables, their hands occasionally brushing. Every touch seemed to draw a breath that neither acknowledged. When the lights finally flickered to life, Daniel smiled, not the polite kind Ethan remembered from years ago, but a genuine one that reached his eyes. "There," he said, standing back. "Couldn't have done it without you." Ethan laughed lightly, wiping his hands. "You could have. You just like an audience." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe I just like the company." The air between them thickened with unspoken things. Ethan felt it, a quiet awareness that neither could escape. They moved inside, where Daniel poured 2 glasses of wine. The conversation slipped easily between topics: travel, music, the uncertainty of growing older. Each word deepened a sense of intimacy that neither had planned for. Ethan learned that Daniel had been living alone since his separation. "It's strange," Daniel admitted. "You spend years building a life with someone, then suddenly you're just yourself again. No echo of what used to fill the house." Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. "That must feel lonely." "It does." Daniel's eyes softened. "But sometimes, loneliness makes you notice things you ignored before." The silence that followed was not empty. It hummed quietly, fragile but alive. Ethan realized that the loneliness Daniel described wasn't only his, it was shared. They were 2 people adrift for different reasons, finding in each other a reflection they couldn't look away from. Daniel stood to refill their glasses, his movements deliberate, unhurried. "Ryan mentioned you're not seeing anyone," he said casually, still facing the counter. Ethan froze for half a beat. "No, not really. Haven't felt like it lately." Daniel turned slightly, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. "Maybe you just haven't met the right person." The words lingered longer than they should have. Ethan wanted to answer, to deflect with humor, but the way Daniel looked at him silenced everything. It wasn't bold, not even flirtatious, it was something quieter, more human. A question without words that he looked away first. "I should probably head out soon," Ethan murmured, though his tone betrayed no urgency. Daniel nodded slowly. "Of course." But when Ethan rose, Daniel stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but near enough for the air to tighten between them. The room felt smaller, the walls heavier with what neither dared to say. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said softly. "It's been nice, talking like this." Ethan met his gaze, uncertain whether he was searching for apology or invitation. "It has," he said quietly. "I didn't realize I missed this kind of honesty." A long pause stretched, balanced delicately between choice and consequence. Then Daniel stepped back, the moment dissolving before it could become anything more. "Take care, Ethan." Ethan nodded and left without another word. The night air was sharp against his skin. As he walked to his car, his heart thudded with something close to guilt, but not quite guilt. It was confusion, curiosity, maybe even hope. That he drove home in silence, his mind replaying every glance, every breath they'd shared between words. He knew he was on the edge of something irreversible, yet a part of him wanted to step closer, to see what waited beyond the line he shouldn't cross. When he reached his apartment, his phone vibrated. A single message from Daniel glowed on the screen: "I enjoyed tonight. Sleep well." Ethan stared at it for a long time before locking the phone and setting it face down on the table. That he told himself to forget, but the truth was already unfolding quietly, something fragile, forbidden, and impossibly real. Ethan didn't see Daniel again for several weeks. What had begun as harmless visits now lived like a secret between 2 silences. Each morning, Ethan told himself the distance was good, necessary. But late at night, when messages stayed unsent and memories refused to fade, the quiet became unbearable. Ryan called one afternoon, his voice cheerful and familiar. "Dad's finally decided to move out of the house," he said. "He's getting a smaller place near the coast. Says he wants a fresh start." Ethan's heart sank, though he couldn't explain why. "That sounds good for him," he managed. "Yeah," Ryan replied, then added, "He's been weirdly private lately. Guess he's tired of everyone's expectations." The call ended, but Ryan's words stayed behind, echoing through Ethan's apartment. A fresh start. That night, Ethan found himself scrolling through old texts, each one a reminder of conversations that had felt ordinary at the time but now seemed weighted with meaning. He typed a message: "Hope the move's going well." Then he deleted it. Days later, Daniel reached out first. "Would you like to stop by before I leave?" Ethan hesitated, then wrote back, "Of course." When he arrived, the house looked different. Boxes stacked by the doorway, curtains half drawn, shelves stripped of their memories. Daniel stood in the middle of it all, wearing a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Didn't think I'd get sentimental," he said quietly. "Turns out even empty walls can say too much." Ethan helped him carry a few boxes to the car. The silence between them was full, but not heavy. When they finally paused, Daniel leaned against the doorframe, studying him with the calm of someone who had made peace with unfinished things. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. Ethan met his gaze. "I almost didn't." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's probably for the best." The honesty in his tone disarmed Ethan. "It wasn't nothing, was it?" "No," Daniel said simply. "But not everything that matters is meant to last." Ethan wanted to say more, to explain the confusion, the guilt, the strange gratitude that had followed him since that night, but the words stayed trapped behind restraint. Instead, he helped Daniel seal one last box, folding the tape neatly along the edges. When they sat with 2 mugs of coffee amid the clutter, Daniel spoke first. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, curious, cautious, always trying to do the right thing, even when your heart is asking you not to." Ethan looked down. "And did you ever figure out which one wins?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Neither. You just learn to live with the echo." For a while, they sat listening to the creak of the house and the distant hum of passing cars. There was no need for apologies, everything that needed to be said was already present in the quiet between them. When Ethan finally stood to leave, Daniel followed him to the door. The moment felt suspended, delicate, almost reverent. "Take care of yourself," Daniel said softly. "You deserve someone who isn't afraid to stay." Ethan swallowed, the words catching in his throat. "You too." He turned to go, but Daniel reached out, not to stop him, only to rest a hand lightly on his shoulder. It was a brief touch, full of gratitude, not desire, a farewell sealed in silence. Outside, the evening air smelled of rain again, just like the first day. Ethan walked slowly toward his car, feeling both lighter and emptier. He didn't look back, though he knew Daniel was still standing at the door, watching. As he drove away, the house receded into the distance, its windows glowing faintly in the dusk. Ethan thought of how easy it was for moments to become memories, how quickly a connection could shift from presence to absence, from possibility to lesson. That night, he sat by his window, writing a message he would never send: "Thank you for seeing me when I didn't know I wanted to be seen." He saved it in drafts, a confession to no one. Weeks later, Ryan mentioned that his father had settled near the coast, happy, quieter. Ethan only nodded. In time, the sharpness of the memory softened, but its truth remained: some relationships don't demand permanence to matter. Sometimes, they arrive only to remind you of your own depth, your capacity to feel, to risk, to change. Ethan never heard from Daniel again. But whenever it rained, he found himself thinking of that dim kitchen, the quiet laughter, and the man who had shown him that not every crossing is meant to end in regret. Some are meant to teach you where your heart begins.